Welcome everyone to the Orthodox Christian Podcast. We had some questions come in on the forum that I wanted to address, but before that, just a disclaimer, I'm not a priest in the Orthodox Church. This is just my opinion. If you're interested in learning more about Orthodoxy, I do always recommend getting to know a local community and seeing how people in that community practice their faith, and then meeting with the leadership if you have further questions. But I do love to answer questions, so happy to do that whenever you guys have them. So this question is from Joel, and he said, I've heard some sects of Orthodoxy suggest for women to wear the veil. In this context, is the hijab, niqab, or any other Muslim type veil permissible? So my thoughts on this are, usually in most Orthodox parishes, there will be women with head coverings. I'm not sure if that's what you mean by veil, but it's pretty common to have some women in different parishes wearing a head covering. I suppose in some parishes it might be more the custom, and other parishes it's less the custom. It really depends where you go. In general, it's not a requirement in Orthodoxy, and for most of the parishes that I've been a part of, it's more a question of personal piety and what the women in that community feel like doing. And then regarding the hijab, niqab, or other Muslim type veils that you're mentioning, I looked these up briefly. So from what I understand, the hijab is more like something that still has the face showing, whereas the niqab is something that covers the face. And within Orthodoxy, from what I've seen, the face is always exposed for people. So if you go to a convent with nuns, their face will be seen, but like basically their head covering is basically just showing their face. And then if you go to Orthodox parishes, sometimes women will have like a scarf around their head, but their face will still be seen. And from my perspective, this is important because our personhood is expressed through our faces. This is how we see what someone is experiencing. This is how we identify people, by their facial features. And so it seems fitting that our faces are seen so that our personhood is not totally covered. And I think that perhaps there's an argument to be made where the face is totally covered, where it is erasing someone's personhood so that you cannot perceive who they are. You cannot distinguish them as a unique individual. You cannot read their emotions and so forth, because a lot of communication happens through the face. So I think it is important to have the face visible. And from what I've seen in Orthodoxy, people's faces are always visible. And then you could do like a theological reflection on this and say that our personhood comes from the Trinity, which is a communion of persons who are united and each have their own unique character or qualities, in the sense that the Son is not the Father and the Father is not the Son, and neither of them are the Holy Spirit. So we are seeking to emulate that to a certain degree within our communities as Orthodox, and it's not going to be exactly the same because it cannot be. God is God by nature and we are only God by participation, but the notion and emphasis on personhood is important within Orthodoxy, and I think that having people's faces visible is an expression of that personhood, how we are at once united as a community, and yet we don't dissolve into nothingness. Our personhood is not erased as a drop in the water, but rather we retain our personhood, and this personhood is primarily expressed through our faces because we are embodied creatures. So that would be my theological argument in favor of having faces seen. So thanks for the question, Joel. And then the second question is from Greg Howland, and he asks, where can I find Divine Liturgy in French and Italian languages? I can give a bit more info on French, not really Italian, but in Quebec, there are parishes that will use French, and so Quebec is a French-speaking province in Canada. And then in France, from what I know from conversations with Dr. Ladesseur, who is from France, the liturgy there is performed in French for the most part, because it seems that French Orthodoxy has really been embodied in the actual French culture, and it's less about these individual groups like, say, you find in North America sometimes, where it's like just the Serbian church or just a Russian church or just the Greek church, and they retain their mother tongue. It seems that from what I've heard in France, it is much more embodied in the actual culture, and they do use French. So I think you could go to France or you could go to Quebec. And then with Italian, not 100% sure, but I imagine there is probably an Orthodox parish in Italy where you could experience the liturgy in Italian. So thanks so much for your question, Greg. If anyone has further questions, feel free to use the link in the episode description. If you appreciate this video, I'd appreciate it if you shared it with one friend or family member. And in the meantime, I hope you have a peaceful week. Take care.